And our meeting tonight is now open for sharing of testimonies of healing through Christian Science.
Janet, Georgia.
Thank you. Thank you, Day, for the wonderful readings tonight. In Georgia this past weekend, there were predictions of severe storms with hurricane-force winds, severe lightning, and tornadoes. The storms were predicted to hit our area at 1 a.m. Monday morning. While I was lying in bed that night, I prayed. About 1 o'clock, I started hearing thunder, then wind and rain with flashes of lightning. I continued praying using statements from Mrs. Eddy's article, A Treatment for Every Day, which is found on the Plainfield website. I prayed that this is God's spiritual household. I included spiritual neighborhood, city, state, and world. I continued also that God is the only power, and the wind was in his fist. Many other statements came to me as I prayed. And until I felt peace, I didn't stop. I heard the wind become less, the rain seemed more gentle, and the thunder was in the distance, and lightning was diminishing also. I thanked God and then fell asleep. The next day, my husband was talking with a friend who lives around 3 miles from us. He told my husband that he woke up around 2 a.m. and watched the storm on radar. He said it was the strangest thing he had ever seen. He said that when the storm approached our area, it separated. Part of it went north of us, and part of it went to the south of us. He said he couldn't figure that out. My husband told me that he wanted to say to our friend that it happened through prayer. I was so grateful to hear this, and I also knew that I was not the only one praying. The following statement from Mrs. Eddy, found in Science and Health on page 2, which was in our roundtable this Sunday, quote, "Prayer cannot change the science of being, but it tends to bring us into harmony with it," unquote. I'm so grateful for God's love and protection. I'm so grateful for my loving and dedicated practitioner who is an ever-present help to me. I'm also grateful for this Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent and for all of you who are attending this healing service tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Donna, Oregon.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to say how grateful I am for the Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent. My husband and I stumbled onto Christian Science by accident and immediately knew it was the truth because it made sense. It wasn't long before we became disillusioned with the church here in town and left it, but we still knew that Christian Science was right, so we continued to study our textbook, Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy. Earlier, someone else in town had also become disillusioned with the church and had also left it. She told us about a Christian Science church in Plainfield, New Jersey that was independent of the Boston branch and that it followed Mrs. Eddy's teachings, which are, by the way, the same teachings Jesus taught. Unfortunately, my husband passed away before we could benefit from this church's practitioners. We're all at different stages of our spiritual understanding, and I'm looking forward to my next step up. Thank you all for being part of this church, and of course, extra special thanks for our wonderful practitioners. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andy, Wisconsin.
Hello, everyone. Tonight, I would like to thank God for his precious guidance during these past few weeks. He has supplied me with everything I needed and much more. My husband and I have been taking rides and supporting local restaurants using their drive-up service. As Wisconsin has many lakes and rivers, we usually found one nearby. Then we ate our meal in a beautiful setting that God had blessed us with. At the store, I have found everything I needed when I needed it. Out of the blue, my beautician called and asked me if I would like to keep my appointment. I did. And though I was her only appointment that day, and we were the only ones in the shop, we were both elated to be up and be doing. During this time, I also worked at the election polls and found the 14-hour-a-day a harmonious event. The gratitude expressed to the poll workers was very uplifting. Thank you to Mary Baker Eddy, this church, and my practitioner for teaching me how to rely on God for everything. Good night.
Thank you.
Joanne, Florida.
Thank you. And Day, thank you for those beautiful readings. Last week, I mailed the recent Liberator magazine to a friend, and the other day he emailed me saying, quote, I received your lovely gift this morning, and it was wonderful. Very well done. All the posts within it are useful and informative. The whole publication is spiritual, end quote. I also gave our Liberator magazine to another friend here who had converted from Judaism and is now a deacon at the local Presbyterian church here in Naples. When I saw her yesterday, she said the magazine was amazing. That was her word. She told me also she went to our website and saw the back issues and said they were a treasure trove of wonderful thoughts and was going to look through them. She said she was amazed at how much was on the website and wanted to know how many members we had in our church. When I told her that there was only a handful locally, but that we have many, many participating members from all over the world, she couldn't get over that. I am so grateful that we have such a beautiful magazine to share, and am encouraged now to pray to see who else God wants me to share this healing magazine with. I'm so grateful for this church, and I'm so grateful to everyone who is making this broadcast possible. It's a godsend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Day, Georgia.
Since joining this church and gaining a better understanding of God, I've come to enjoy quiet time more than ever before, rather than trying to find things to fill my time with, such as watching TV, listening to music, talking on the phone, and even reading sometimes. I find that I much rather make and take moments to sit in silence, reaching out to God in prayer with a request to hear what He's telling me. I've learned that God is always speaking to me, and I have all the ability and opportunity to become better at listening for His voice by practicing more each day. I'm so grateful for everything that I'm continuing to learn in this church that's improving every part of my life and helping me to help others as I progress. I'm very grateful for all the testimonies given so far and those still to be given tonight. And I'm very grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you.
Dave, Florida.
Yeah, hi. One of the thoughts that I've been working with during this whole crisis is demand the blessing. So here's a blessing that just happened over the weekend. Last Thursday, I heard from an old friend who I've worked closely with for over 5 years. We'd stayed in touch after I retired, and he had rented a place during the season down here for a few years, but we drifted apart a few years ago. So he said that in the past couple of weeks, they decided that they wanted to buy in our community and asked if we could help out since they can't come down right now. So to make a long story short, the place he was considering needed a lot of work on the inside, and I told him about a place right next door to us that I knew was going to be up for sale. My wife and I looked at it on Sunday with a realtor. My friend submitted a bid on Monday, and on Tuesday they signed a contract. During all this, I was knowing that if this is God's plan, nothing can interfere with it, and it sure didn't. I'm grateful for how quickly this all took place and to have an old friend back. God is sure good. I'm grateful for Christian Science, to be a member here, and for the work of the practitioner, and thank you for those readings. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy.
I'm so grateful to be here tonight. and for all I am learning at this church. It occurred to me recently that there may be certain parallels between what I went through 7 years ago that brought me to this church and what people are going through in society now. In April of 2013, I found myself sort of ejected from this life I was fully invested in. I lost almost everything, and it felt like I had no place in the world. I couldn't see it right away, but it turned out all of that was the biggest blessing I could have ever had, because it freed me up for what God had planned for me. I think many people who were fully invested in what they may have thought was their best life are now feeling lost and perhaps scared. And in their search for meaning, I know that God will guide them to Him. It gives me great joy to be a part of this mission to bring Christian Science to the world, because that is exactly what I needed to find my place and my purpose, and it will do the same for everyone out there. I'm so grateful for Christian Science, for this church, for regular practitioner support, and for the God-given freedom we have to gather here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Melissa, Connecticut.
Thank you so much for those wonderful readings. Like many, I have been dismayed over the past few weeks to watch my investments and retirement accounts plummet in value. I was very stressed, and it interrupted my otherwise normal sound sleep. After waking up in the wee hours night after night, I decided to get up and pray, rather than wait to pray at my normal morning time. I questioned why I was feeling stress about finances. When things were going well on Wall Street, I was happy and confident that God's love and caring protection was taking care of me and providing me with a sense of security in the form of financial security in the future. I could look at my computer screen and see the savings amount grow and thought that God's hand was at work. Then I read Hebrews 13:8. Jesus Christ, the same yesterday and today and forever. I felt a swell of confidence to know that God didn't provide for me just last year and that His providing wasn't tied to economic security. The belief that my security had changed just because of the same computer screen now showing big decreases was a ridiculous example of malicious mind at work. I began to work with the Lord's Prayer, with spiritual interpretation from science and health. Thy kingdom come, thou art ever present. I understood that God is protecting and providing for me during this time, just as He always does. Enable us to know, as in heaven, so on earth. God is omnipotent, supreme. I understood that God's security remains constant. God isn't protecting me less because worldwide resources are tight. God doesn't say that He won't provide for me as well because my investments are down. There is no conditionality to God. And love is reflected in love. We are all so safe and secure in God's love. Just as we discussed the other day at Plainfield, the more we radiate truth, life, and love, the more God's armor protects us. And God leadeth us not into temptation, but delivereth us from sin, disease, and death. From that, I know that things in the news cannot hurt me or impact me. Declines in the stock market won't ruin my life. For God is infinite, all power, all truth, love over all and all. I understood this closing statement made me realize how completely meaningless it is to focus on stock prices and investments to feel God's loving presence and safety. So I was left at peace with my situation, but I did then think about how the Plainfield practitioners teach us to be on guard for evil and never get comfortable that everything is all good. I should have been praying and protecting my business and investments from evil and malicious animal magnetism. I hadn't been doing my work in that regard, but I have learned and will work towards being more aggressive in protection in the future. But at the same time, I know that God is a loving God and will not punish me for not doing so. Instead, I am lovingly given the opportunity to improve, grow, and flourish in divine mind. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Craig, New Jersey.
Hello. Thank you for those great readings. It really turned me back to going into my closet and regularly, daily, and happily talking with God. I want to give gratitude for God giving me, after chastising my teenage son, a good night's sleep. It might have bothered me and kept me awake, but I was being principled. He had not been telling the truth, and he needed to be brought up on it. He repeatedly justified himself, but we stood with principle, love, and then told him exactly what he should hear, and he couldn't make an excuse for it. Well, I sang myself to sleep with Mary Baker Eddy's hymn 207, Mother's Evening Prayer. O gentle presence, peace and joy and power, O life divine that owns each waiting hour. Thou lovely guards the nestling faltering flight, keep thou my child on upward wing tonight. Well, I had the most wonderful sleep. In the morning, my son was much more agreeable and willing to listen. I thank Mary Baker Eddy and God for all this great support and teachings that we have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wendy, Georgia.
Good evening, and thank you for the lovely readings, Day Day, as well as the previous inspirational testimonies that have been shared tonight. I'm calling to express my deepest gratitude to my dedicated practitioner in this church for all the loving support that she provided over this past week for our little dog Dolce. He was faced with some challenges, but I'm happy to say that he is now, as she put it, quote, back to his normal self as God's dear and perfect pup. For that, for the lessons that I've learned over this past week, and for God's never-ending, all-encompassing care, protection, and love, I am most grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Barbara, Pennsylvania.
Good evening. Some time ago, I worked a temporary job in the credit department of a major U.S. company as a department secretary. One of the department employees took an immediate dislike of me and was very, very vocal about it. The offices were in cubicles, and so that she was could be heard easily. She would say, usually say quite loudly something like, Barbara, then saying my last name, is a terrible secretary. This continued for about 2 months, and it happened quite frequently, if not daily. During this time, I prayed very simply, mostly just to love, to forgive, and to see her as God's child, which certainly happened. One day, as she was walking down an aisle between the cubicles, I was standing, filing, facing her. And instead of cringing, a sense of just pure love for her that just swept over me, which just had to be God's love for her. Nothing was said, but it was clearly felt, for there was no more taunting. During the next 10 months I was there. She still didn't like me at first, but that soon was corrected as well, and she became a staunch supporter, even offering to provide a recommendation letter when it was time for my temporary position to conclude. What a wonderful experience of God's love for us all it was. There was more to this healing, but I'll just leave it there. And I want to say thank you for this healing service and the beautiful readings. Thank you.
Thank you.
Betty, California.
So glad to be back and so glad to be here tonight. I want to thank you for the readings tonight. They were wonderful. I'm very grateful for our church's calendar and all the love and hard work that goes into it. Each day there is a short statement, always appropriate for the day. Sometimes they are humorous, sometimes from a famous person or a quote from the Bible or from Mrs. Eddy or an old-time Christian Science worker or from the Round Table, and sometimes they are from author unknown. Recently, on Monday, April 13th, there was a quote from author unknown that I was familiar with. It said, quote, "When having a problem, know it comes to pass, not to stay," unquote. I used to use this before I became a member of the Plainfield Church. The thought that a problem came to pass and not to stay was very comforting. It meant to me that my problems were of a temporary nature, and that made them easier to face them and move on and hopefully to learn and grow from them. After coming to the Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent, I learned that when problems come up, I can use Christian Science as taught here in the Plainfield Church to truly solve them by bringing my thought into harmony with God. By doing this, often with practitioner help, I needed to learn lessons like opening up my heart to God's plan, dropping pride or resentment, which often was the source of the inharmony to begin with. I'm so grateful for all of these lessons. I am grateful for this church and for Christian Science, and I'm very glad to be here tonight.
Thank you. Gary.
One of the things about Christian Science is that it teaches us that God cares for us in every aspect of our life, in every way, whether it's health or relationships or any other kind of circumstance. I had an experience a while ago that left a huge impression on me, and I'd like to share that. I had to take a business trip to Europe, and it was in February, which is not exactly my favorite month for traveling to Europe. And before leaving, I asked a Christian Science practitioner for help. And I was instructed to maintain my own atmosphere wherever I went. And I was told that I'm not going to Europe, but Europe is coming to me. In other words, don't be impressed by anything out there, but take my own atmosphere with me. And he also said that this trip is all about spiritual growth and nothing else. Well, I found this very helpful and went on the trip and was scheduled to, I guess it was a Sunday going there and then scheduled to come back on a Thursday. Trip was going very well, but all day Wednesday, the news was filled with this forecast of the worst winter storm that New Jersey was going to have that year for Thursday, the day that I was supposed to return. And all day Wednesday, airlines were canceling their flights in and out of Newark Airport in New Jersey. Well, by the time Thursday morning came, it seemed like virtually all of the flights in and out of Newark for that day had been canceled. My travel agent rescheduled me for a flight first thing Friday morning because they were certain that my flight was going to be canceled. Well, we finished our business Thursday morning, and it was time to go to the airport, and my flight had not been canceled yet. And I thought this was so strange because I had to decide, well, was I going to go to the airport? And the airport was a great distance from where I was staying. Was I going to go to the airport and take the risk that my flight would get canceled like virtually all the other flights in and out of Newark? Or would I stay at my hotel and have a peaceful evening and just get the next flight Friday morning? Which seemed like the easy thing to do. But the thought came clearly, go to the airport. Well, I was receptive to that thought. I had good help from my practitioner, and the thought came very clearly. So I went to the airport Thursday, and to everyone's amazement, we got on the plane, and the plane took off. And about 7 hours later, as we were approaching the east coast of the United States, I was praying for a safe landing. And as I was praying, I got this mental picture of the plane sitting in God's hand, and God's hand gently bringing the plane down to the runway. It was a very vivid mental picture. And sure enough, we landed safely and smoothly at Newark Airport. The snow, which had been heavy, had temporarily turned to rain, and the runway was wet but not icy. And we had a very safe, peaceful landing. And when we got into the airport was empty. So we breezed right through customs very quickly. And I remember thinking to myself, this was the most pleasant flight experience I have ever had. And I was so grateful to God. It was so clearly God at work. And I was so grateful for the help that I received from the practitioner for helping to keep my thought right and clear. And so grateful to Mary Baker Eddy for giving us this science that shows us clearly and teaches us how God cares for us in every way. I'm so grateful for the experience and so grateful to be here with you all tonight.
Thank you. Chardell.
Hello, and thank you for those wonderful readings. They truly are wonderful. My gratitude tonight is for the Bible and the teachings here at Plainfield, and they are deeply felt. It was suggested that we read all 4 Gospels of the New Testament from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John concerning the resurrection of Christ Jesus, doing it all at the same time. Each one begins its own and brings its own light to the events of that monumental and sacred time. To ponder each version is very comforting as well as informative. Although I have read these Gospels separately before, I had forgotten about Joanna, mentioned in Luke 21:10. I read that she was the wife of Chuza, I do not know how to pronounce that, and along with Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, took spices to the tomb and found the stone rolled away. She and other women are mentioned in Luke 8 as having been cured of, quote, infirmities, end quote, and thus became disciples. And there are also other women mentioned. It is very beautiful to be learning more about the Bible, and my life continues to be enriched with new understanding as well as appreciation. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda.
Thank you for the readings tonight. I would like to express my gratitude for the healing prayers of a Plainfield independent Christian Science practitioner. Some time ago, a red area developed on the side of my face. I worked with her daily, and during this time I gained new views of God and His creation. This healing did not come right away, but during this time I had many other healings and lessons to learn. At some point during the work, the skin returned to normal. The healing came quietly. During this time, my thought also became calmer and more receptive to good. It taught me the value of patience and persistence. I gained a greater understanding of Christian Science, and it helped me begin to put God first in my life. I am grateful for the teachings and living here at this church, and that it is taught that there is no shame in working out problems, and you get great support to keep at it. I'm very grateful I have found this church, very grateful for Christ Jesus and Mary Baker Eddy and my practitioner.
Thank you.
Dale, Virginia.
Thank you so much for those beautiful readings tonight and every very wonderful testimony. In last week's Wednesday evening meeting, a testifier spoke about identifying her husband by the qualities that he reflected from God. And in this week's Bible lesson, it tells us from the book of Job, quote, "Acquaint now thyself with him and be at peace, thereby good shall come unto thee," end quote. These things reminded me of a healing experience I had years ago. Suddenly, one evening, one of my arms was extremely painful to the touch, and I couldn't open my hand. As soon as I could, I sat down to my desk and spent several hours dwelling on the attributes of God, which are expressed from the synonyms of God. Mary Baker Eddy tells us in Science and Health on page 465 that, quote, "God is incorporeal, divine, supreme, infinite mind, spirit, soul, principle, life, truth, love," end quote. Instead of dwelling on the material picture or wondering what could be going on, I completely turned from this false picture, denying that it could possibly touch an image or likeness of God. For the rest of the evening, using the synonyms of God, I claimed intelligence and control of mind, freedom and strength of spirit, everlasting harmony and wholeness of soul, stability and changelessness of principle, health and vitality of life, integrity and constancy of truth, tranquility and obedience of love. There were many more qualities that I identified with the synonyms of God, and holding to these as the only truth about me, a child or reflection of God, completely wiped out any fear that tried to present itself. After a while, I was able to get ready for bed, sleep comfortably, and in the morning I realized I could open my hand, and every vestige of the problem was gone and never came back. God is indeed an ever-present help, and as it says in Job, when we acquaint ourselves with him, we will be at peace, and good shall come. I'm very grateful for this service tonight and everyone's contribution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Florence, Georgia.
Thank you. Thank you, Dede, for the readings tonight. I am grateful that through my study of Christian Science, the truth is always present right where the lie seems to appear. And this has become more clearer as I endeavor to just practice it. Every time there's an error, I'm doing my best to know that only the truth is present. It's helped me to turn quickly to God for the opposite of any error that seems to be going on. And I know now that ultimately God's allness, onlyness, everywhereness, his power and action, his supremacy is the truthful opposite to every lying suggestion. I too went through this storm this weekend, and I'm grateful that I kept knowing that the deceiving mortal senses will not make me fear. They even sounded the tornado alarm, which is very, very rare in our area. And for about 20 minutes, but through it all, I kept knowing that no, the truth is present, which is the atmosphere is God and God alone. The winds are in his arms. And I was so gratefully impressed that not even the winds came our way. It was very gentle rain and was all over, quiet. But this example really tells me, and it emphasizes how we should be so careful not to be deceived. Because as that hymn says, it's the sense that would deceive. And it makes me very aware that all the time, no matter what comes, let's keep our eyes fixed on what's true, what's really going on. It is a great way to face any other demonstration. And I know and I'm grateful that it has helped me in so many ways, whether it's physical problem or relationship problem even, to keep my eyes on the truth present, which the lie is appearing about.